I wasn't supposed to be there that long. Just a few hours, she'd said. Help with the accounts, fix the printer, maybe explain a few things about online orders. Her repair shop smelled faintly of oil and citrus hand wipes, an odd mix that made it hard to tell if it was clean or just lived in. Her son was my friend, sort of. We used to hang out after class, but he'd taken a job out of town, and she'd asked if I could help while he was gone. Just till I get the hang of it, she'd said over the phone, her voice low, a little amused, like she already knew I'd say yes. So there I was, sitting behind the counter with her laptop open, typing in invoices while the hum of the ceiling fan dragged through the still air. She moved in the background, her presence quieter than the tools, but somehow sharper. I kept my head down mostly, tried not to look too often. Her name was Layla, mid-40s, maybe a little older. Confident in that way people get when they've stopped trying to prove anything. She wore her hair tied up, always a few loose strands escaping, brushing the side of her neck. There was something about the way she spoke, half business, half warmth, that made it hard to tell where one ended and the other began. I was halfway through logging a shipment when she leaned over the counter beside me to reach for a stack of folders. The air changed, just that small, charged shift that makes everything else blur out. Her arm brushed mine lightly, not on purpose, and her perfume, something clean, not sweet, settled around me. I froze. She noticed. Of course she did. You're staring at more than the books, she said, voice low, teasing, but not cruel. There was a smile on her lips, but her eyes were careful, watching how I'd react. I felt my throat tighten, the words tangling somewhere between apology and confusion. I wasn't. I started, then stopped, realizing how much that sounded like I was. He straightened, a quiet laugh under her breath. Relax, kid. I'm joking. Kid. I hated that word more than I should have. She turned back to her workbench, shoulders squared, movements precise. The silence stretched. The fan hummed again, louder now, or maybe just because I couldn't stop hearing it. I tried to focus on the screen, on the numbers, on anything else, but my mind kept circling back to the way her tone had shifted mid-sentence. The softness that followed her teasing, as if she'd said something she didn't mean to. A while later, she brought me a cup of tea, too much sugar, not enough milk. You look like you've been staring at that screen for hours, she said. Take a break before your eyes fall out. Her fingers brushed mine when I took the cup, barely a second, but it lingered, heavier than it should have. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she did and just didn't show it. We didn't talk much after that, just the occasional question about orders, her quiet humming in the background, the creak of the stool when she leaned forward to fix a lamp. The air between us felt like something invisible had been folded into it, something fragile and unspoken, sitting just beneath the ordinary. When I left that evening, the sun had dipped low, pouring a thin orange line through the shop window. She stood near the doorway, wiping her hands on a cloth, and said, "Thanks for helping out. You made things easier today." I nodded, tried to say something normal back, but nothing came out that didn't sound awkward. On the walk home, I replayed the moment, the brush of her arm, the teasing line, the way she'd said kid with a pause afterward, like she wasn't sure she still meant it. And for reasons I couldn't name, I kept thinking, it didn't feel like a joke. It had been a week since that afternoon in the shop. I told myself I wouldn't read too much into it, that she was just teasing, that it meant nothing. But when she texted, "If you're free, the computer's acting up again," I was already halfway out the door before I replied. The shop looked different that day. Quieter. Dimmer. Maybe because it was raining, and the sound of water tapping against the roof made everything feel slower. She was sitting at the counter, reading through a pile of receipts, a pair of glasses low on her nose. I'd never seen her wear them before. "You didn't have to come in the rain," she said without looking up. "It's fine. I like the rain." That got a small smile out of her. Tired, almost distracted. "You like a lot of things you shouldn't," she said softly. I didn't know what she meant, and maybe she didn't either. I sat beside her, waiting for the laptop to start. The air smelled faintly of paper and rain. She kept her distance, but I could sense her presence anyway. The quiet rhythm of her pen against the counter, the way she bit her lip when she read something that didn't make sense. You've been working too much, I said. She gave a short laugh. You sound like my son. Maybe he's right. That made her pause. She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were lined with exhaustion, the kind that no amount of sleep fixes. For a second, the guardedness slipped. She exhaled, slowly, and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Running this place alone isn't easy, she murmured. Some days I wonder if it's even worth it. It was strange, hearing her say something that real. Usually she spoke in jokes, in half-sentences that ended with a shrug. Now there was no mask, no teasing tone, just a woman who looked older than she wanted to feel. You're doing fine, I said quietly. More than fine. She smiled faintly, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. You don't have to say that. I'm not. Her hands stilled. Small hands, work rough but graceful, a thin silver ring glinting as she turned it absent-mindedly. For a moment, I wanted to ask about it, whether it meant something or someone, but the question felt too personal, too dangerous. So I just sat there, pretending to scroll through files while watching her reflection in the laptop screen. The way her shoulders sagged slightly when she thought no one was looking. The small hum she made under her breath, like she was trying to fill the silence before it turned heavy. Do you ever regret things? I asked suddenly, without meaning to. She blinked. All the time, she said, almost a whisper. Then, after a long pause, but it doesn't change anything. The sound of rain thickened outside, the shop wrapped in gray light. Neither of us spoke after that. When the computer finally restarted, she leaned closer to check the screen, her shoulder brushing mine. She didn't move away immediately. Neither did I. And for a heartbeat, I thought she might say something, anything, to acknowledge it. But she just exhaled, stood up, and said, You should head home before it gets worse out there. I nodded, though neither of us made a move. The rain hit harder, echoing in the silence between us. And as I left, I caught her reflection in the glass door, her hand resting on the counter, her eyes lowered, like she was holding something back. I didn't know what it was, but I couldn't stop feeling it. The rain hadn't stopped all week. Every evening, the same gray drizzle, the same hollow sound of drops against metal roofs. I was in the shop again, this time later than usual. She'd asked me to stay, something about finishing a backlog of orders before the weekend. It was close to 9 when the lights flickered. She glanced up from the workbench. Generator's old, she said. Don't worry if it goes out. I smiled. You always say that like I'll panic. You might. You still look like someone who apologizes for thunderstorms. She said it with that quiet smirk again, but her voice was softer now. The kind of softness that comes when the world outside is too quiet to pretend around. When the lights steadied, I noticed how different the place felt at night. The hum of the fan had stopped. The only sound was the ticking clock above the shelf. She was sitting across from me, sorting through receipts by lamplight, her sleeves rolled up. There was a faint smudge of ink on her wrist. I couldn't stop looking at her hands, the slow, methodical movements, the way her fingers brushed against the papers like she was trying not to crease them. Every small gesture felt deliberate, quiet, too human to ignore. Why do you still help me? She asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. Because you asked. That can't be the only reason. I hesitated, eyes fixed on the screen. Maybe I like being here. She didn't reply. I could feel her eyes on me, though, heavy with something I couldn't name. A moment later, her phone buzzed. She frowned, glanced at the name, and turned it face down. I caught the look before she could hide it. Tight jaw, flicker of irritation. Then she sighed and muttered, Ex-husband. Always calling when it's inconvenient. I tried to sound casual. You don't have to answer. I know, she said. But her voice had changed, quieter, thinner, like she was reminding herself. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt loaded, stretching too long. She leaned back in her chair, fingers brushing the rim of her teacup, and said, almost absently, Sometimes I forget what it's like to have someone just listen without wanting something. I swallowed hard. You don't have to forget. Her gaze met mine, steady, unreadable. Something flickered between us then, something that felt too close to a confession. The air tightened, the kind of stillness that happens right before you say something you can't take back. But before I could, the phone buzzed again. Louder this time. She pushed back her chair, exhaling sharply. I should lock up, she said, avoiding my eyes. I nodded, standing, pretending not to feel the sting of interruption. I gathered my bag slowly, hoping she might say something else. When I reached the door, she called my name. I turned, and she was standing there in the half-light, her hair loose now, her expression unreadable. Thank you, she said quietly, for not asking what that call was about. I figured you'd tell me if you wanted to. Her lips curved, not quite a smile, not quite a goodbye. You always say the right thing at the wrong time. For a second, it felt like she might step closer. The air between us bent, fragile, heavy. My heart kicked hard in my chest. But she just reached past me to flip the sign on the door. Closed. Our shoulders brushed. The contact was barely there, soft, fleeting, but it felt like an entire conversation we weren't ready to have. And as the rain started again outside, I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't going away. The storm that night was louder than usual. Wind tearing at the windows, rain beating like it wanted to get in. I'd gone to the shop after class, unplanned, just to check if she was still there. She was, sitting behind the counter with the lights dimmed, a cup of untouched tea beside her. She looked up when the door creaked open. You shouldn't be out in this weather. You shouldn't be alone in it. That earned a small, tired smile. She gestured toward the chair opposite hers. Then sit. But don't talk. You've had enough talking for today. So I sat. The clock ticked, the wind howled, and the silence between us felt like something alive. Every so often, she'd glance at the door, like she was waiting for someone else to walk in. Someone older, someone that made more sense. After a while, she said quietly, "You don't have to keep showing up, you know. You're not responsible for me." I know. Then why do you? I hesitated. Because I want to. She exhaled, slow, sharp, almost like a laugh. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. You make things complicated. You mean honest. That made her go still. The sound of the storm filled the room again, covering the stretch of silence between us. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer. You think this is honesty? This, whatever this is. I looked down at my hands. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't feel like nothing. Her breath caught. A quiet, almost imperceptible shift. She turned away, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You shouldn't say things like that. Why not? Because they don't lead anywhere good. I wanted to argue, to tell her that maybe it wasn't about good, that maybe it was just real. But the words felt too fragile to touch. She stood then, walked to the shelf behind her, pretending to tidy the same stack of papers twice. You're young, she said finally, voice trembling just enough for me to notice. You think wanting something makes it possible. I swallowed. And you think regret makes it impossible. That stopped her. For the first time since I'd met her, she didn't have a reply. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine, and whatever she was holding back flickered through, raw and human. We stood there, the storm thrumming behind us. Nothing between us but the truth neither of us wanted to say out loud. I don't know what we're doing, she said at last. The words were steady, but her hands weren't. Neither do I. The silence that followed felt heavier than sound. Her lips parted like she might speak again, but she didn't. She just watched me, eyes searching, resigned, almost pleading. Then, quietly, like a confession meant for no one, I forgot what it felt like to be seen, until you. And before I could move, before I could answer, she turned off the light. For 2 days, she didn't text. No reason, no excuse, just silence. I told myself it was fine, that she needed space, that what happened during the storm wasn't anything. But every hour without a message felt like I'd done something wrong. By the 3rd day, I showed up at the shop anyway. The sign said closed, but the lights were on. Through the window, I saw her sitting behind the counter, staring at something small in her hands. She didn't look up when I walked in. Just said, "You shouldn't be here," without the usual edge. I know, I said, but I came anyway. Her eyes flickered up then, red around the rims, like she'd been crying. On the counter was an old photograph. 2 people, smiling. She was younger in it. The man beside her, dark hair, warm grin, had his arm around her shoulders. She turned the picture face down before I could ask. You remind me of him, she said quietly. The words hung there, heavy and small. Your husband? I asked. She nodded once. He left. Years ago. Not suddenly. Just little by little. Her voice trembled, but she kept it even. He used to sit right there, pretending to fix things he never finished. Always humming. You do that too. That same half tune, like you're not aware of it. I didn't realize I was holding my breath. She gave a small laugh, bitter at the edges. Isn't that ridiculous? To miss someone who stopped missing you first. I wanted to say something comforting, something solid, but all that came out was, it's not ridiculous. She looked at me then, really looked, and for the first time, I saw her without the layers. The humor, the control, the teasing, all stripped down to something raw and lonely. You shouldn't see me like this, she whispered. I already do. She exhaled shakily, shaking her head. You don't understand what you're getting caught in. Maybe I don't want to understand, I said. Maybe I just don't. The word stopped me cold. Not harsh, not angry, just fragile, pleading. She pressed her fingers to her eyes for a moment, then reached for the photograph again, running her thumb over the corner as if it could erase time. He died, she said softly. A car accident. 6 years ago. I still find his things in drawers, like he might come back for them. Silence. The kind that wraps around everything. I'm sorry, I murmured. She nodded, the smallest motion. Everyone says that. But you don't have to be. You didn't know him. I wanted to reach across the counter, to touch her hand, to do something. But I didn't. Because suddenly it all made sense. Her hesitation, her distance, the way she looked at me like I was both comfort and threat. She wasn't avoiding me. She was avoiding remembering. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside, a car passed through puddles, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Finally, she whispered, You shouldn't come tomorrow. I need to figure things out. I nodded, but she didn't look up. And as I turned to leave, she said quietly, almost to herself, You even laugh like him. Something in me cracked open then. Not loud, not visible, just a quiet breaking that changed everything. A week passed before I saw her again. No calls, no messages, just the quiet hum of missing someone I wasn't supposed to. I told myself it had ended, that her silence was an answer. But one evening, as I walked past the shop, I saw the light still on. It was late, past closing. The door was unlocked. She didn't look surprised when I stepped inside. Just tired, but softer somehow. I thought you said you needed time, I said. I did, she replied, closing a drawer. But time doesn't fix anything. It just reminds you what still hurts. We stood there in the dim light, surrounded by the familiar clutter, the tools, the hum of the small desk lamp, the scent of rain on metal. For once, she wasn't wearing her careful expression. Her hair was loose, her sleeves rolled up, and her eyes looked honest. I've been thinking about what you said, she murmured, not meeting my gaze. About it not feeling like nothing. My heart stuttered, and she took a slow breath. You were right. The words were so simple, so quiet, that for a second I didn't understand what she meant. But then she looked at me, really looked, and it was all there. The exhaustion, the fear, the warmth that had been trying to stay buried. It's wrong, she said, her voice trembling. It's unfair, but it's real. She walked past me, toward the window. The rain outside had started again, soft, steady. She leaned against the glass. You remind me of what I used to feel. Before I learned how to hide from it. I moved closer, slow enough that she could have stepped away if she wanted to. She didn't. I don't want to take anything from you, I said quietly. Not memories, not guilt. I just want to be here. If you'll let me. She turned then, and for the first time, didn't try to correct me. Didn't tease, didn't deflect. Her eyes shimmered faintly, but she smiled. Small, resigned, and heartbreakingly human. I keep thinking, she said, if he were still alive, he'd probably like you. You're kind in the same quiet way. I'm not trying to replace him. I know. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was something else, softer, like the sound of something settling into place. When she finally moved, it wasn't dramatic. She just reached across the counter and placed her hand over mine. Her fingers were warm, trembling a little, but sure. No words. No promises. Just that small, deliberate touch. I didn't pull away. Neither did she. We stayed there like that, listening to the rain, the world outside dim and distant. I could feel her pulse beneath my palm, steady and human. After a long time, she whispered, "Maybe this is enough. Not more. Just enough." I nodded, even though it felt like my chest might cave in. She smiled faintly, eyes wet. "Good," she said. "Then we don't have to ruin it by naming it." And in that moment, no grand confession, no kiss, just the weight of two people who'd finally stopped pretending. I realized this was what love looked like when it stopped trying to be perfect. It's been months since that night in the shop. She still runs the place, same creaky sign, same scent of oil and tea, same quiet hum when the door opens. But something in the air has changed. Or maybe it's just me. I still help out sometimes. Not every day, just enough to make it look casual. Enough to keep the rhythm of it from fading. When I walk in now, she doesn't pretend to be surprised. She just looks up from the counter, gives me that small, knowing smile, and says, "You're late again." There's no edge in her voice anymore. No teasing to hide behind. Just warmth and something steadier. We don't talk about that night. We don't need to. It lives quietly between us, in the way she refills my cup before it's empty, or how I wait for her to lock up even when she says she doesn't need me to. She laughs more now. Still guarded sometimes, but lighter. The first time I heard her laugh without catching herself halfway through, it felt like a victory no one else would ever know existed. And me? I stopped trying to name things. What we are, what we aren't. There's a strange peace in that. Because not everything worth feeling has to be declared out loud. Some connections are too fragile for words. They live better in glances, in shared silences, in the quiet knowing that you changed someone, even just a little. Sometimes, when we close the shop, she sits beside me on the steps. We don't say much, maybe something small about the day, or the weather, or nothing at all. But there's a comfort in the not speaking. Like the noise of the world doesn't reach us there. Last week, she showed me a photograph, the same one I'd seen months ago, the one she'd hidden. This time, she didn't turn it face down. She looked at it for a long moment, then said softly, "It doesn't hurt as much anymore." That was all. But I knew what she meant. Grief doesn't vanish. It just changes shape, finds quieter corners to rest in. And sometimes, if you're lucky, someone helps you find where to put it down. I think that's what we did for each other, without planning to, without meaning to. She gave me stillness. I gave her something like beginning again. Neither of us asked for it, but maybe that's why it worked. When I leave now, she always says, "Drive safe." And it sounds like a prayer. I always answer, "See you tomorrow," even if I don't know if I will. And somehow that's enough. Love doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just lingers quietly, in the smell of tea, the echo of laughter, the small mercy of being remembered by someone who no longer owes you anything. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?